Once upon a time, in a quiet village, surrounded by green hills and flowing rivers, there lived an old woman named Mira. She was over 80 years old, with silver hair, tied neatly in a bun, and a gentle smile that never left her face. Everyone in the village admired her, because she always looked peaceful and content, no matter what life brought her way. Some villagers said she was born with good fortune, but others knew she had faced many hardships. Every morning, Mira sat under a large banyan tree outside her small cottage, sipping a cup of tea and watching the sunrise. She welcomed each day with calm and gratitude. Even when crops failed and other villagers complained, she smiled. When someone in the village got sick, she visited them with warm soup and kind words. And even when she lost her husband, and later her only son, she did not break down in anger or bitterness. She continued to be kind, hopeful, and helpful to others. A young man named Rohan, who lived nearby, had been going through a rough time. He had lost his job, fought with his family, and felt like nothing was going right in his life. He often passed Mira's cottage and wondered how she remained so joyful when his heart felt so heavy. One day, unable to keep his thoughts to himself, he approached her with curiosity and respect. "Grandma Mira," he said softly, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but I've been watching you for a long time. Life hasn't been easy for you. You've suffered great losses, yet you smile more than anyone I've ever met. How do you stay so happy in every situation?" Mira looked at him kindly, her eyes full of understanding. She took a sip of her tea and motioned for him to sit beside her. "Let me tell you a story," she said gently. "When I was a little girl, I used to cry whenever something went wrong. One year, during a terrible storm, the roof of our house caved in. I was scared and sad. I remember crying for hours. My father, a wise and calm man, sat beside me and said, 'You can't stop the storm, child, but you can dance in the rain.' At the time I didn't understand his words, but as I grew older, I began to see what he meant." She smiled softly, lost in the memory for a moment, before continuing. "Over the years, I realized that life will always bring joy and pain, but every moment gives you two things: an experience and a choice. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always choose how you respond." Rohan listened closely as she went on. "When my husband fell sick, I couldn't cure him, but I could choose to be with him every day, to hold his hand, to make him laugh. I could choose love over sorrow. When my son died in an accident, I was heartbroken. I cried, yes, but then I remembered all the joy he brought into my life. I chose to focus on those memories instead of drowning in loss." She looked into Rohan's eyes. "And do you know what else I did? I started helping others. I brought food to the sick. I told stories to lonely children. I listened to those who needed someone to talk to. When you help someone else, your own pain becomes lighter. You stop thinking about what you've lost and start noticing what you still have." Rohan nodded slowly. "But isn't it difficult to smile when your heart is hurting?" "Yes," Mira said with a small chuckle. "It is difficult, but anything worthwhile is difficult. Happiness isn't something that falls from the sky. It's something you build brick by brick like a house. You build it with kindness, with gratitude, with courage." She pointed to the small garden beside her cottage, full of blooming flowers. "Do you see those flowers? They bloom not because life is easy, but because they keep reaching for the sun, even when it rains. You too must reach for light, even in dark times." Rohan thanked her and walked home, feeling lighter than he had in days. That night, he wrote down what he had learned, Accept what you cannot change. Find gratitude even in sorrow, and serve others. He hung those words above his bed. In the days that followed, he began helping others in small ways. He shared food with a struggling neighbor, smiled more often, and when things didn't go as planned, he reminded himself of Mira's words. You can't stop the storm, but you can dance in the rain. Years later, Rohan became known in the village for his calm, joyful spirit. One afternoon, a young child asked him, Uncle, how are you always so happy? Rohan smiled, just like Mira had once smiled at him, and said, Let me tell you a story.